TV news for a connected world, where our goal is to pin down some of the major retooling that's going on with the news product in concert with the various digital platforms on which it iterates. With me here in person today are Barb Moshard, the SVP of News for Hearst Television. Hello, Barb. Meredith McGinn, the EVP of Diginets and Original Production for NBCU Local. Hello, Meredith. Eric Ludgood, who is the head of Newsy from EW Scripps Company. Welcome, Eric. And Stephen Bach, who is the director of sales for the news segment at Amagi. Welcome, Stephen. And hopefully joining us very soon digitally will be Brooke Thomas, the host at Fox Soul, and also the anchor of Good Day LA on Fox's KTTV, and Joni Vasiliadis, who is the VP of digital content at Tegna. And there they are. There's Joni. Anyway, I think she's frozen, though, her video. So hopefully we can get that. Oh, hello, Joni. Welcome. And hopefully we will also get Brooke Thomas in shortly. So welcome to everyone, and a reminder to everyone here in the room that I'll take a question or so at the end if there is one. And if you are virtually attending and you have a question, please put it in the Q&A on Zoom, not in the chat, and that is the best way that we will see it. So the name of this panel emphasizes a connected world, which suggests that digital media are an essential part of the DNA of this reinvention of TV news that this period that we're undergoing right now. So I want to start with the entire group and go around the horn and ask, what does that mean in terms of reinvention on linear TV news, on broadcast? Is all of this innovation that we see in the news product right now happening on digital, and broadcast is sort of remaining in this calcified format it's been in for decades? Or are we seeing just as much change on the 5 o'clock news locally as we do on digital platforms? And let me start with Eric.
Thank you. I'm going to say I see the change happening simultaneously. The primary thing that's happening is that we are making sure that we're getting as much content as we can, and we're distributing that content across all these platforms. The reality for us is that we are making it happen all at the same time, and not just waiting for the 5 o'clock.
Barb?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I would also say that I don't think that it's necessarily the case that the format has been the same. I think the broadcast news format has evolved over the years. You know, there was a time when there were 2 anchors sitting at a desk, reading a bunch of news, going to weather, going to sports, and that was it. And there's a lot more players in the mix. We let at least my folks hear me say often that our content should determine our format. We should make the decisions about how we put that 5 o'clock news together, or how that 10 o'clock news looks based on the content. So I agree, it's a simultaneous evolution, but I do think that there's a mindset that we've only done local news the same way for a long time. I don't think that's true. I think it is evolving. And I think the digital platforms give us an opportunity to just amplify the great content being produced.
We're all trying to be more story-driven. We are story-driven now, and not anchor-driven, not event-driven. We're more about the story.
And I'm glad for the pushback on the premise of my question, by the way. Stephen?
Now I'm in trouble, right?
Wait till you see what I've got for you. Stephen?
Well, I see, we work with a lot of local station groups and local broadcasters, and I think, the premise of only having 6 or 8 hours a day of news production is sort of out the window. There's a 24-hour wheel to film now. So there's a lot of creativity in how you're producing between those live newscasts that are going out, on the traditional broadcast days. And then, of course, all these new destinations, constantly thinking, how are we getting content there, on all sorts of different places.
Meredith?
Yeah, I think in some respects we don't get credit for the incredible innovation that the stations have been doing for years, primarily in the technology space and behind the scenes, just to increase the speed of which news gets to the viewers. And to some other panelists' points about pushing content to every platform at all times, we're now producing for OTT platforms, constantly live on the web. So the innovation is happening, even if you may not see on the 5 o'clock news.
Okay, perhaps my question was a bit too harsh. Do we still have Joni? remotely? Joni? Can't hear her.
Well,
There you are. We can hear you now.
okay, I think I'm a little sorry about that. Yeah, I agree with all my panels. I would also say that we have more competition, so that spurs more creativity. I would also say for our talent, it's changed, letting them authentic. You can look at YouTube creators, look at who you see on social media. So I think it's changed. We've given permission for some of our on-air folks to be more themselves. I would also say in our production, the way you edit, the way you use graphics and music, we've taken a page from what we see online.
But is everyone hearing this okay in the audience? Okay. Eric and Meredith, Newsy and NBC Universal Local have been using Diginet as a distribution platform for news products that were born on digital. How effective has that been for finding new audiences? And if you could both, and starting with Meredith, also what percentage of your current audience in NBCLX in this case is coming from the Diginets?
So broadcast is incredibly important to our success. Over-the-air audiences make up the majority of the NBCLX audience, and we are seeing OTA audiences grow. We know that for the over-the-air homes, it's a smaller universe. So we're one of the only all-news sources for them. That being said, we're focused heavily on growing our connected TV distribution, and we're seeing the viewers increase dramatically on Zumo, Samsung, and in DMVPDs, YouTube TV, Hulu TV.
And of course, Eric, with Newsy, you had this massive kind of reinvention, rebranding in a sense, and this Diginet, adding the Diginet to this distribution network.
So yeah, we started, this is my phone. Let's put it. Okay. We launched October 1st. So to answer your question directly, I don't know how much of our audience is OTA yet, because we've only been on the air for less than 3 months. But moving from where we were to where we are right now, we're a 24/7 television network that provides national news, and we're distributed over 95% of the country. But we are doing everything that we've done before plus some. So moving from the space where we were quite successful on Fast TV, OTT, we're taking a expanded product to the OTA audience, and we expect to see adoption there very soon.
Stephen, when we talked earlier prior to this panel, you had some thoughts about Diginets and cloud-based playout. If you want to just really briefly explain, I don't want to get too into the weeds.
Sure. Yeah, when I joined Amagi, I was spending most of my time thinking about channel creation and playout for OTT. Some of the destinations you mentioned, like Samsung and Zumo and Pluto. But what's cool is that these workflows where you're building a channel in the cloud can now be applied to broadcast. So we're doing it with NBCLX, we're doing it with Tegna, where we're actually compositing channels in the cloud that can be played out, over the air. And I think, it kind of shows how groups are rethinking the level of investment that's required for a broadcast station. You can experiment, you can have pop-up channels, you can create more channels, take up more of the spectrum. You don't necessarily have to have this heavy metal infrastructure anymore, to get a channel off the ground.
Right. And I see we have Brooke Thomas from Foxhole. Hello, Brooke.
Hi.
Welcome. Glad we got you in.
I'm here.
Great. And I have a question for you in just a moment. But first, I want to ask, now we have a panel on this later today on remote production, so I don't want to go too much into it, but I did, while I have you, Barb, want to ask, the remote production conditions that we've all worked under for the last 2 years have undoubtedly fostered some new thinking about how to tell a story. Barb, how much has remote production, has it had any kind of reinventing impact on the news product that we see at her stations?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it has been remarkable what we've seen people do over the last couple of years, right? We've had a lot of these tools, but I don't know that we adopted them the way that we were forced to. And so now, in ways that we're able to tell stories in ways that we might not have been able to because we can reach sources we might not have been able to reach. I can interview anybody, right, on Zoom, as long as we got it working, we can do it. But the truth is it works more times than it doesn't. If you all remember, and I don't want to call somebody out, but we used to use Skype or whatever we used to use, right? And we couldn't, it wasn't reliable at the time, or we didn't know what we were doing. Now we know. And so we can reach resources. We're more nimble. We're faster. I mean, to the point made, we have to be fast, right? We've got to be able to turn this content on mobile, on our broadcasts, on the multiple channels that we're serving. So I think, but the storytelling piece of it, to your question, I think we just have ways to reach sources and locations. And that adoption of that has made us better.
Yeah, we certainly use it a lot more in videos that we produce. Brooke, you are at Fox Soul, which is a streaming channel launched with a fairly specific demographic in mind. How do you see that niche audiences, whether they're demographic, whether they're subject specific, are potentially being better served now than they used to be?
Well, I mean, I think from many of our viewers' standpoint, they feel like they're being served at all, so that's a plus, right? It's on one hand, you can call it kind of a niche audience. On the other hand, you can acknowledge that this is one of the most loyal, consistent TV viewer demographics that has ever existed, that also very vocally has not felt represented, has not felt part of the conversation, has not felt like, they're spoken to, they see themselves. And so this is all of that on one small platform. And I think, yeah, it is a separate audience, but it's also for everyone. It can also be for everyone, because I think it's educational, right? When one group doesn't feel represented and you talk to them about them and how national news, specifically our show, affects them. On the other hand, the other people get to see something that they don't normally see, and it kind of changes the conversation nationally, I think. I hope that answers your question.
It does, absolutely, it does, it does. One advantage that digital has for news innovations is time. There's more elasticity to tell a story time-wise on digital platforms. Do we still have Joni? I hope so. Joni, if you're still with us, I want to ask you to take, there you are. If you could take that question, just in terms of how have you used that elasticity to good effect at your stations?
Yes, we have an advantage, but we have to be careful not to abuse it, right? So we can do more experimentation. We can be more innovative with the limitation of time. We can do serial content, and drop it all at once and let people watch it consecutively. We can do extended live program without upsetting the Wheel of Fortune viewers. However, we have to be careful that we're not just going long, because we can, right? Great storytelling still matters. Great editing, keeping in the great and getting rid of the good, that all still matters. And fortunately, especially with live video, we have real-time data that can tell us, stop going long just because you can, right? People are dropping off. You don't want to do this anymore. We have that kind of real-time feedback that we didn't have before, and we can experiment more with different formats. There's also for some reason, a feeling like we can fail faster on digital. We can try a lot more. It's very open. We're not limited to a half hour. So I think there's just this ease about innovating that comes and really produces more creative content, because the maybe nervousness goes away.
Well, as Mark Twain wrote a long time ago, I'm sorry this is such a long letter, but I didn't have time to write a short one. So you still have to be self-disciplined in terms of your editing then. That's very interesting. NBC LX has played a lot with time, short and longer form. Meredith, what are you learning about audiences' receptivity to a broader mix of content length with news?
Well, I think to play off of what Jenny just said, just because it's longer doesn't mean it's better. So we've been very deliberate about giving the story the time that it warrants, whether it's a minute of some context in chat on a quick story in our newscast, or if it's a 5-minute interview, and then we can pull a few of those headlines. The best sound bites for social, catering to the platform it's on is very important. We've also, with the 24/7 news network, been able to take advantage of some of our cinematic journalists, storytellers, who will see a story and say, I can make an hour documentary out of this. and really dig into the characters and the players in that story. And then consumers can digest it in a series or all at once.
Are you, like Joni, looking in a very granular way at your audience, at where you're getting drop-off points in your stories?
For sure. Yes, for
Is
better
there
or
a sweet
worse.
spot? Is there still a number where?
You know, I think it really depends, and not to evade the question, I think it just depends on the story.
Mhm.
It's all about the characters in the story and the topic.
And I don't want to leave you out of this question because I know Newsy does the same thing with elasticity and time. So what are you learning?
We're learning that the stories still matter. We're learning that the story still matters, and we have everything on the air from 30-minute documentaries to we're still doing 5-part series that people are really drawn to. And those stories are running anywhere from 4 to 8 minutes long, and that's on the linear. Then we'll drop them on VOD or wherever it's necessary. But we are still doing it all. And the one thing that we're finding right now is that we are too looking for that sweet spot. It's no one has said, has pushed back on anything that we put on so far. And based on some of the data that we have for our weekends where our documentaries are, those are the places where people are staying the longest. So they are watching.
Moving to streaming is a key part of the whole connected equation here. Stephen, when we talked earlier, you said that news is particularly well suited to the streaming environment, which might seem counterintuitive. I don't take that as a given. So why do you say that?
So at Amagi, we think a lot about ad-supported streaming, you know, the free ad-supported streaming world fast, work with a number of the co-panelists here. We did a report in Variety in October that showed there's now 1,000 of these fast channels in the US alone, and that had doubled since last summer.
To which I would think only 1,000.
You know, a lot of the channels that are sort of the early movers in this space, you know, take the Bob Ross channel or other, you know, studios that are repurposing, you know, or finding new use for their content libraries. You know, a lot of that content could arguably be viewed more efficiently in a VOD space, you know, where you can pause and rewind and come back to it. But news, you know, by its very nature, really does require a linear presentation to do its job. It's got to be live or nearly live. And I think that this is a big boon for news brands. You know, Amagi, we're just starting in news, and we're seeing that it's the top generator of viewership hours across our client set. Our clients grew 20% from the second quarter to the third quarter as far as viewership hours. And personally, I see it getting more difficult for non-news brands to get new channels up on some of these platforms like Samsung and Zumo. You know, there's quite a bit of saturation there. But, you know, what I'm seeing is that the news clients that we have are really being warmly embraced by these connected TV platforms, particularly on the local side. Even large station groups are saying, come bring all, you know, we'll give you all those stations to a platform like a Tubi or something like that. So you're seeing, you know, more than just national news or national weather. You're seeing quite a diverse channel set.
And of course, everybody on this panel is represented in streaming. And Barb, I think you're the most recent entrant relatively with very local, right?
Correct.
And this is a call out to it. Andrew Fitzgerald is it?
Andrew
Who I want to
Fitzgerald.
have a longer conversation with on my podcast soon to dig into the plans for that trajectory there. I want to also talk about social, because that is a moving target in this whole landscape. And anyone can jump in on this question, including our virtual panelists. How is the importance of social platforms changing for your news content? Are certain platforms still seen as essential? And how, or even more so than with reconnecting with audiences? And how are you essentially reassessing your relationships with social platforms based on the tumultuous last couple of years? So whoever wants to take that first.
Okay, I'll jump in. I would say that we are constantly reassessing, and I think based on the evolution of the business, we're going to have to continue to reassess. Obviously, breaking news, you talked about news and the value. People respond to breaking news, big stories. We saw it this weekend with I know you were talking about weather earlier, and the tragedy in Kentucky and around the Midwest. people are looking for that information. So we need to be wherever they're going to find it. We want to be there. And that means social media is going to be a place for it. So Facebook and Twitter are still places that people are going to look for it. But it's also a double-edged sword, because for us and for anybody on this panel, our goal is to be the trusted source and to ensure that what they're getting is accurate and fair. And we also know that people go to social media and don't always trust what they're getting. So what we've got to figure out, I think, as trusted news organizations, is how to be in those places and to be represented as the brands that we are, right? So they are valuable, but we do have to continue to reassess the relationships.
Joni, what do you think about this?
I agree very much with Barb. I feel that to have one social platform as essential to your strategy is very dangerous, right? We need to be diverse in how we get our traffic and how we reach our audiences. And so I think many of us were overly reliant on Facebook 5-10 years ago for our referral sources. And it's much smarter to kind of spread across multiple platforms and to be okay with if one of them went away or changed their algorithm tomorrow, the core of your audience and the relationship you have with your audience isn't dependent on one single social platform. I agree completely with trust and misinformation, and having a responsibility to counter misinformation on those platforms and being really strategic about our headlines and how they get shared. Then I would also add mental health, right? It's become a really toxic place for our journalists who are on those platforms trying to reach their audiences. So what are we doing as organizations to make sure we're prioritizing their safety, we're prioritizing their mental health over any engagement expectations?
Great.
Are those issues happening more on one place, Facebook namely, than other platforms, that kind of abuse?
Facebook's not the best. Yeah, it's pretty bad there. It exists across all platforms, but I would say Facebook's a really difficult partner in helping us.
And do you think it's because of an intransigence there, or because they just, the problem has metastasized beyond its control?
I think there are a lot of factors. I think we're probably not their priority partners, if I'm being honest, news and publishers. And I think that it is kind of spiraling, but how they built their algorithms kind of encourage some of it. So we're a little bit fighting that battle on our own. Thankfully, we can use each other, the people on this panel and similar organizations, to say what priorities are as a team. I think that's one of the things where we are better, kind of many voices fighting that same battle of mental health, of misinformation, of trust, to hopefully lift it in priority in where these social networks might see it.
Anybody else want to chime on social before I move on this whistle stop tour through many different points?
I mean, I think there's been much debate among our team as to what to focus on. The numbers are still with Facebook. Like, as much as maybe we want to walk away from that, I don't think it's smart to do that, because you just walk away from so many potential viewers to your brand. We've been able to use Instagram to highlight our brand in different ways than you would use Facebook or Twitter. And we're currently not active on TikTok, but that's an opportunity that I think we see for our hosts to get more engagement, to show their personality, to gain users' trust, and to get some different engagement than we get daily on our content on Instagram or Facebook.
Next up, I want to talk about the role of the anchor and how that too is evolving. Eric, you and I talked about this a little while ago on Talking TV, the podcast for TV News Check. It seems that the way that anchors dress, the way they engage the audience, the way that they're shot, is all those things are changing. And I'm wondering how you see, Newsy has a lot of younger anchors, particularly it has for years. That's how is that changing? Oh, sorry.
We're changing because I think the audience is changing. The audience wants authenticity. Jenny said it earlier. We are allowing our anchors to be who they are, obviously within certain bounds of decorum, of course. But we're allowing our anchors to be who they are. If anchor shows up for the morning show, decides he doesn't want to wear a tie that day, that's okay. Anchors, we don't talk to anchors about their hair and what they're wearing. We talk to them about how they're presenting stories and making sure that they're engaged in stories. We're encouraging them to, listening to, if they're listening to a story and there's talk back between the anchor and the reporter, to say, wow, that was amazing. That hurt. I couldn't stand to hear that, as we were talking about what happened in Mayfield, Kentucky. So we're encouraging our anchors to be themselves. From a production standpoint, we're just trying to do good TV, and we allow them to, to express themselves.
Brooke, I want to ask you, you're an anchor. How this idea of authenticity comes up. What does that mean? How do you convey authenticity in a way that perhaps we didn't see from an anchor a few years ago? How is that, and how do you see your role changing?
I have seen it change, even I guess the somewhat short amount of time I've been in the business, where we've always been told to be authentic. We want authenticity, but it hasn't actually been true. And now there's real permission. And I think that we've seen a shift in social media. I also do think has changed, because I'm not even sure I necessarily believe the viewers and how authentic they want an anchor to be has changed. I think that we're seeing different groups of viewers and listening to them in ways that we haven't before, because now we're in a space where women who look like me can wear their natural hair, and that is seen as professional. Whereas just years ago, a few years ago, in certain markets, a woman whose hair grows out of her head and it's styled and it's combed and was seen as not professional, and that's so disappointing. And I think we're seeing more viewers call out that that's disappointing, and more managers fight for the thinkers to be able and reporters to be themselves in that way. And that's been nice to see. But even in the short time, I've seen a different ability, a different permission to truly be yourself. And so the word authenticity actually means really be yourself.
And at NBCLX, you also have some very different presentation of your hosts and anchors. Their affect is very different.
So I think we get much more liberty being in a new business. A number of years ago, one of our NBC flagship stations, we took the ties off the weekend morning.
Valerie
news
Stock told me
anchors.
once, famously, a necktie came off and the world fell apart. She didn't put it that way.
Well, the anchor himself felt very self-conscious because so many viewers called an email saying it was disrespectful, unprofessional, and we don't have that burden at NBCLX, fortunately. We do lean in on the whole team being themselves in every respect, as Eric said. And that means the way they dress, but also the way they ask questions, the way they present their scripts. And we don't often use very detailed scripts. We lean in on bullet points so people don't seem stilted. That's incredibly important. It's all about being real and being much more personable and approachable in conveying the important information.
Or you're nodding. Are we seeing this liberation at Hearst too?
I think that it's interesting. I think that there is still an expectation in the local news markets of a level of, I think Brooke used the term professionalism. So, we came here looking professional, right? We want to present ourselves as credible and trusted. So I think there's still a level of expectation that people are going to bring their best, most professional self to their job. But no, do they have to wear a tie? No, but in certain markets, it will rise to the occasion of, oh God, what has happened? Versus my focus, which is where everyone else has been here, which I think is how to have our anchors engaged, how to have them actively participating in the storytelling, the being a part of conveying it, sharing it in a way that is natural. And so I appreciate Brooks, or I think it was Brooks' point about permission. I think we all have given more permission. I think the pandemic, as odd as it is, gave people permission to, people loved seeing what was behind them, right?
We were in everyone's homes.
Right.
So
And so even if they dressed the part that they felt they needed to for that role, that you might see the kid's toy in the background. And that was awesome, which is also what social media allows people to do. But I go back to our anchors and reporters they need to be credible, trusted, members of these communities. And we talk about connection. There is no greater connection than the journalists who live and work in these local markets, right? They are on the ground when these storms hit. They are at the events that are, the happy events that happen too. And that's where some of the greatest connections are made.
Yeah, and part of this authenticity, part of this sort of how this is evolving. I've seen this at LX particularly, and I talked to one of your journalists, Hurtado,
Fernando. Yes.
Hurtado, about a series where there's more showing of process, of reportorial process. There's like a show your work kind of dynamic that seems to go on. Barb, is that happening also?
Oh, all the time.
And Tegna does that, I know.
Yeah, as much as we can, because that supports that trust, that supports that credibility. Let us show you. It's also critical for our viewers who are asking us, help us navigate through these crises, these difficult times, right? The way you navigate is you understand. So we help explain. That's how I think anchors can kind of reinvent themselves in many ways, or are reinventing themselves, because they're able to be those, they take you through that process. They explain what's happening. They answer the hows and the whys.
Which of course you need more time to do that too, which goes back to the time elasticity. If you're going to show your process, it's more than just a quick 1 minute hit with information.
But you know what's funny, if I can just add to that, everything old is new again, right? Because we used to
Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right, we used to do documentaries and long form storytelling. And then, the audience kind of said, don't waste our time. We got to just give us the headlines. Now the world is such, and this is the piece I love so much about the various platforms, because we can tell an incredible story in Orlando, Florida that needed more time, but then we can expand that and people can see it everywhere because it's on our digital properties. So I just think it's exciting to be able to go back to some of the stuff we were doing.
Can I just add, just to add to that, feedback from the streaming platforms is that they don't want to see clip reels. They don't want to see a channel that's all 2.5 to 5 minute news segments, one after another. They want to see long form, engaging documentary. They want to see analysis on these new digital channels. So I think it's a great time for it to come back.
That's been a big push for journalists recently, and especially at Newsy, where we're talking about the why and the context, and we're taking the time and making the time that's necessary, even on a day of story. If there's an extra piece of information that explains it, offers a little bit more context so the audience understands why the story is important. We're doing that on a regular basis. That's part of who we are.
Our keynote just a few minutes ago was about weather, Fox weather. Barb, I know you have some news on this front. We did something about this in TV News Check just I think yesterday, in terms of a new reporting initiative that's engaging the weather and climate. Can you talk a little bit about that and why now, why you're doing that now?
Yeah, thanks, Michael, for giving me an opportunity to. We launched an initiative that we are calling Forecasting Our Future. And the why is because there's nothing more important than we do on our local newscasts and on our local digital properties than provide weather and big story information, and particularly weather. I was able to listen to a little bit of that, and it's I really appreciate that there is this focus from everyone on trying to deliver timely information where people can be prepared and protected. So what we do now is we prepare and protect people by providing that information all day throughout the day on all the platforms. But there is, back to this storytelling, there are great stories to be told. We have experts, more than 100 Mets across the country working at our different stations that can collaborate and tell stories to explain why things happen. I saw someone this morning on a social media physically plotting out, one of our meteorologists, but he was physically plotting out what had happened on a piece of paper, which was interesting to me, what had happened in Kentucky, trying to do his own sort of analysis. Of course, he's got lots of tools he's going to use, but was it one tornado? Was it multiple tornadoes? And really talking about stuff I couldn't follow. But the point is, if they do that right, then I can follow it and I can learn. So we really feel this is important, and we feel it's important from a local perspective.
And that's going to start next month?
It starts next month, but I will tell you, I've got somebody at a climate conference right now. So we're actually started now.
Okay. I want to flip to mobile as a platform and bring Joni back in. Joni, how is mobile evolving for you at Tegna in terms of the kind of news content that you're routing there, the forms it's taking, and the purposes that it's serving for your audiences? In other words, how is that usage evolving?
Yeah, I think that mobile is really broad, right? We can talk about our apps versus mobile web versus social, and everything requires something a little bit different. We can't force our audience to watch video on web when they want to read an article that they might have a video experience on social. We can try and we can kind of evolve and develop our product to be more video focused, but they are slightly different platforms and people come there for different reasons. But I think the biggest thing that I think about with mobile is it's not just a platform to push out content, it's a platform to gather content, to really bring it in, because everybody has their phone all the time, right? We know, I'm sure everybody on this panel has had great numbers from video that they did not shoot, that came from someone else's home, that came from the scene of breaking news, and those perform well across platforms. They perform well on our phone, they perform well on streaming, they perform well on our broadcast. So what we've done for mobile is invest a lot of resources in user-generated content gathering. How can people go to our app? How can people go to our website and easily, directly from their camera roll, just like they would share to Instagram, share to our apps, and that can go directly into our content management system, get the proper approval it needs, and go back onto our site. So you have this kind of a two-way relationship with your audience through their phone, through mobile, that is a content creation source for you, for your broadcast, for several different platforms.
But UGC has been with us for some time. So are you talking about just taking away some of the friction of that process? Do we want to have more UGC routed to news organizations rather than directly to social? And it's about kind of rerouting that traffic?
Yeah, it's a few things. It's taking away the friction, absolutely, both not just for the user, but for all teams, right? For our content creators who need to move fast. People talked about needing to turn content quickly. It's a lot easier to have a tool that puts in place all the permissions and rights that you need, go directly in your content management system, and then all you have to do is that verification. That's really important, but with a few clicks, you can get onto your site, and soon we're building a map where we can map it out in our DMA for broadcast, right? So right now we have a way that our user-generated content pulls in. It's in a community map on mobile, and we're building that for TV. And it's a great way to engage with your loyalists. You're never going to get the volume that you get on social, because social is inherently a place where people go to post that video they got, but your loyalists, we have loyalists who send us stuff every single day. And 100 patio furniture I don't really need, but if there's one gem that leads to an amazing story, and we've seen that happening in Kentucky, then that's worth it. And that's why you cultivate that relationship.
Eric, I want to ask you about how mobile is evolving at Newsy. Are you differentiating more for mobile? Are you pushing the same content to all platforms? How do you think about it now?
Right now, we are pushing all content to all platforms, and we are going to continue to do that as we grow as an organization. But the idea for us for mobile is it is going to be critical in our growth.
Sorry, mic switching around. We have an audience question. I'm going to just relay right now from the virtual audience. With social media and online becoming more important, how central is the traditional on-air newscast to your overall operations? Which we sort of glanced at, but if anyone wants to come at this from a different perspective.
Our broadcast operations, our newscasts are incredibly important. They continue to be big drivers for us in terms of our success. And we have a relationship that we've built through that. So we have to be everywhere, but I think what we're doing on television continues to be. And again, we're talking about streaming services that look like television stations, right? So what we've been, not all of them, they're all very different, but a lot of them are taking what we've been doing and it looks like a television station. So I think our broadcast news product remains incredibly important and will continue to evolve to be in all the places where people are going to get it.
I think you think of the traditional newscast, if you will, as the engine where all of this information, where all of the content creation starts. And that engine creates all of this content, and then we just start to disseminate it as we go.
I think one of the ways that the value of the traditional newscast is reflected is in the sensitivity to putting it on connected TV, right? You see a wide range of opinions on how that's done across many different ownership groups, whether it's truly simulcast for cord cutters, whether it's delayed, or whether it's just, kept off OTT entirely.
I wonder if we're coming to a point in which the nomenclature and the semantics around all of this is going to need to be revisited and changed, because as I was saying with Fox Weather, that what is it a channel? Is it, they said, well, it's Fox Weather. But what vocabulary do we use? Mm-hmm. If anyone in the audience has a question, now is the time. Is there anybody who wants to? Because we've just got time for about one more. Okay, then I'm going to ask a last one of everyone on the panel, virtual and in person. To close us out, what is the one technology about which you are most excited to help carry your news storytelling forward next year? Let's start virtually with Brooke.
Oh, I'm like, come back around to me. I need to think about that.
Okay. All right, we'll come back around to you. Joni.
I'm excited for how we've evolved our content management system into a video heavy CMS. And by that, I mean the ability to go live on any platform and all platforms, social, Roku, Fire, our website, and to be able to program a 24/7 live grid if we want to do that, to set us up for streaming success. So I'm really excited about that for next year.
Okay, Eric?
I'm excited about some of the things that we're doing behind the scenes in terms of content preparation with editing and with our ability to get those things cut a lot quicker and having the ability to get it done quicker and more creatively and then get it on television.
Barb?
Yeah, I would say some of the remote production techniques that I've seen recently and learning more about that. It's not, as you know, tech's not my area, but that, watching some of the remote production that we're being able to do, I would tell you I'm most excited about, as we mentioned earlier, the adoption of the tools that we have and that we've been able to use so much more effectively in the last year.
Stephen?
Love this question. Thank you.
It's a layup for you.
No, I think what I'm most excited about, a lot of our clients are getting creative in their toggling between recorded content and live content in a 24-hour wheel. And, particularly among local station groups, the ability to potentially, if you're in Atlanta, take your Jacksonville station live. And in the year ahead, we'll be able to do that in just a few seconds. So, throw out the rundown and completely change over to breaking news in a heartbeat.
Meredith, you got a giant toy box at LX.
Yes, and we've been using AR and VR on our set. That's been amazing. I think the game changer day in and day out is really the light, easy remote production. I was watching an interview that we did yesterday from a meteorologist in Kentucky who used her iPhone via quick link system and was live like that with a conversational walk and talk, looked fantastic. It's completely changed our whole ability to get stories on really quickly. And our platforms are all about urgency. It's about immediacy and letting people know that we're going to be there when news breaks now.
And I think authenticity comes from that too. If it's easy
Yes.
and quick, they are natural in their environment. So I think it's all part of it, right?
The way, some of the new phones are, the quality is phenomenal. You can rig professional mics, use selfie sticks and a little bit of lighting, and you can walk and talk around an area and not be stuck behind, a big camera.
You should see my vacation pictures from Cancun.
We'd like to.
I would think that I was
Get the drone going.
And if we could just come back to Brooke from the anchor's chair. Brooke, if you want to chime in.
No, for sure. At least from my job, it is social media. And I know we spent a lot of time talking about social media. And at some point, before I even got into the business, kind of seen this burden, right? And I think now, as we talked about earlier, it is more of a tool. And for me, just sitting at the desk during breaking news, it has become this amazing tool. And while on one hand, we can talk about how, our jobs have evolved with social media, but social media will make you evolve. That, you know, you go where it goes. Google Circles was supposed to be a big thing at one point, and obviously, and it's still a big focus on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and maybe TikTok and Snapchat for a little bit. But it has become this incredible tool just for my actual job, to be able to do my job and to communicate in ways that you weren't able to before. And so for me, I wanted to see what's next and how I'll be able.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we have come up against our time. I'm going to ask my panelists to just sit tight for just a second and thank them profoundly for a great conversation, while Kathy is going to check in very quickly with Social News Desk.
Kim is coming up on vMix right now, I believe.
There she is.
Kim Wilson, founder and CEO of Social News Desk, big provider of social media management. What is the biggest challenge your client stations face this year with social media?
Kathy, well, listen, thanks for having me today. It's great to see you guys, even if it is through the screen yet again. But yeah, I mean, I think 2022 is going to be really exciting for social and newsrooms. One of the big trends that we're seeing is around Twitter. Twitter is actually putting out some pretty cool new content distribution kind of settings within Twitter. I can't say a lot more about that, but we're helping them test that through Social News Desk, and we're excited to see where that goes for newsrooms. LinkedIn has actually become a bigger and bigger play for newsrooms, and we'll be rolling out support for that next year as well. And then I would say marketing of news brands on social is really effective. Newspapers have been doing this for years to build up, email addresses and all that first party data and get digital subscribers, and the TV stations are doing it more and more now too. And so we've developed quite a few ways with tech-enabled services to help TV stations, promote tune in and app downloads and building those newsletter strategies too, which is pretty big, I think, next year for television stations as well. So we're excited about all that, and we'd love to help you with any of it. And thanks for having me today, you guys. Enjoy the show.
Thanks, Kim. Nice to see you. So once more, I'd like to thank my panelists, Barb Moshard, Eric Ludgood, Stephen Bach, Meredith McGinn, Brooke Thomas, and Joni Vasiliadis. All of you, thank you so much. Really great conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.